Welcome to the 100th podcast of The Real Story with Jeanne and Adam. Now, some of the beginning podcasts were done under the In the Spotlight podcast that I did with my co-founder, Kathleen Murphy. But we have moved on as she has moved on to other adventures. And this is now The Real Story with Jeanne and Adam, where we try to connect the dots for our listeners on policy, politics, and the politicians that put those in place. And so on my 100th podcast, I am thrilled to have with me Amy Gehrke. She is the executive director for Illinois Right to Life. And she is a true friend to this show. And in full disclosure, I'm a board member of the Illinois Right to Life Action Board, where we take on some of the political issues surrounding the right to life issues in the state and then the federal level. Amy, welcome to the program.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, there's a lot to discuss.
A lot. Yeah. So this is a crazy, crazy time in the pro-life movement. One we didn't think we'd see in our lifetime, but it's
Isn't
good.
that true?
It
I mean,
really
we're
is.
looking at nearly 50 years of fighting for Roe v. Wade to be reversed. And now we are just waiting on pins and needles nearly every single day to find out if that decision is actually going to come down. What is your prognosis there?
Well, we really don't know. Ever since the leak on May 1st, everybody in D.C., everybody at the court has been keeping things very close to the vest. Not that they wouldn't otherwise, but particularly now so that there was this leak, and which was, as we all know, completely unprecedented. That being said, we're all operating under the assumption that it's going to be on Monday, the 27th. The general thought all along has been that it was going to be at the very end of the session. This is, clearly one of the most controversial opinions that they're going to be issuing. And so generally when there's something like this, they do it at the absolute 11th hour and then get the heck out of town. So it could be tomorrow, it could be Thursday, but likely next Monday. So that's what we're working towards.
Well, that's only a week away as we
today.
tape this on June 20th of 2022. So it's a week away. We're going to get this monumental decision down that we've been waiting for a long time because we always felt like it was a states' rights issue, even as we work locally to essentially help women make a different choice personally and to oppose abortion and to accept new life in their life, because we know it's the best thing. Now, it shouldn't be, though, as controversial as the left is trying to make it out to be for a couple different reasons. One, this is not a ban on abortions by any stretch of the imagination, is it? It means that just that decision returns to the states.
Right. And there was actually a poll that I saw just a couple weeks ago that over 70% of the population thinks that when Roe versus Wade is overturned, it's going to outlaw abortion, which is absolutely not the case. There are 26 states where it could be outlawed, but in places like Illinois, it will be not only business as usual, but most likely more business than usual once Roe versus Wade is overturned. So,
boy, you're not kidding. They're banking on it in the state of Illinois. Before we get to that topic, though, I wanted to talk about the polling because last Friday, the Wall Street Journal put this editorial together. It's called The Contradictions of Abortion Polling. And in that editorial, they say the conventional wisdom on abortion polling is that the Supreme Court is walking into a gale force political wind if it overturns Roe v. Wade. Gallup reported last week that 55% of Americans identify as pro-choice, up 6 points since 2021 and near a record high. The Journal's poll last week says 68% of people hope the Supreme Court doesn't completely overturn Roe. You're right, then that means that they don't understand that it simply returns to the states. But going on, a movement in such top-line figures is meaningful, but it obscures as much as it reveals. What do people mean when they identify as pro-choice? In the Gallup survey, 67% of Americans say abortion should be generally legal in the first 3 months of pregnancy, but it falls precipitously to 36% in the second trimester and 20% in the final trimester. I mean, that is really the issue here, even in the state of Illinois. There was polling done just last year that suggests in this, and by the way, in that particular poll, the majority of people polled were pro-choice Democrats. And even in that poll, 66% of the respondents said that they believe in the state of Illinois that abortion should be limited to the first 3 months. Additionally, the case that the Supreme Court is getting ready to overturn Roe v. Wade on hinges on was an Alabama case,
Mississippi case.
A Mississippi case that was limiting abortion to the first 15 weeks.
Exactly.
So what I mean, there's a lot of Americans who don't understand anything about this court case or abortion law.
Right. Well, I mean, the general school of thought is that when people say that they don't want Roe versus Wade to be overturned, they have no idea what Roe versus Wade is, as this polling indicates. You know, I've been doing pro-life work for over 30 years now, and time again throughout my entire career, whenever you talk to people about the specifics of abortion, limiting it to the first 3 months, common sense protections like parental involvement laws, like informed consent laws, making sure that women have all the information about their preborn babies and what abortion actually is before they undergo the procedure, no taxpayer funding of abortion, anything like that. When you talk to people, they generally are much closer to the position of a group like Illinois Right to Life than they are to the abortion industry, which, you know, has gone from safe, legal, and rare back in the 90s to abortion on demand without apology throughout all 9 months of pregnancy. And here in Illinois, I've been in Illinois for about 1.5 years now. One of the things that just has been really eye-opening is how few people here in the state have any idea how radical our laws are. That, you know, of course, abortions always take the life of a preborn child, but the laws that Governor Pritzker has signed into effect have made abortion incredibly dangerous for women as well, and people just don't know.
Well, I mean, you're not kidding. So incredibly dangerous for women of abortion. Okay, let's talk about this. With Roe v. Wade at risk, this is a Chicago Tribune article. Planned Parenthood of Illinois makes abortion pills available by mail for state residents.
Yeah,
now, I mean, that is
it's insane.
It's insane.
Yes,
that's right.
Yeah.
Not to mention there was legislation just last session, and I don't know if people picked up on this. There was literally legislation that said that on community college campuses, in vending machines, you had to have RU 486, the morning after pill. The morning after pill. The morning after pill. You had to have that in vending machines
on college campuses. At a reduced rate.
At a reduced rate of $40 for the 2 sets of pills. I mean,
right.
What is going on with patient safety and caring about women and making sure that their health is protected?
No regards for women's safety whatsoever. I mean, with the RU486 by mail, there is no way for a physician to determine if a woman has an ectopic pregnancy. I mean, I've had 2 ectopic pregnancies. There's no way I would have known because the symptoms of an ectopic pregnancy are very similar to those of the abortion pill. So that is what really hits home with me on a personal level. Women really don't know how far along they are. The RU46 chemical abortion is only safe for a very limited time during pregnancy. And, you know, any woman out there listening today who's been pregnant knows that it's really hard to know exactly how far along you are. And there really is no safeguard at all for women in these various circumstances when RU486 is being distributed like candy through the mail. And then the Plan B on college campuses, there's no telling who could get those. Young girls could walk up to the vending machine. Men who don't want their girlfriend to be pregnant could get it easily, put it in drinks. There's all sorts of nefarious behavior that it could so easily happen with these very dangerous drugs just being, distributed literally in the case of Plan B like candy.
I never thought about that. You could also have just, one girlfriend talking to another girlfriend say, well, here, why don't you try this? Take this. It should help.
No, exactly. Exactly.
They don't know.
Right. Well, and, then there's also, what Governor Pritzker did through the Reproductive Health Act. Abortion clinics are no longer under the umbrella of ambulatory surgical centers. So abortion clinics in the state of Illinois basically regulate themselves. They're not subject to state health inspections. Basically, nail salons and tanning salons face tougher inspections than abortion clinics. Women's deaths are no longer required to be investigated by coroners. Again, crimes could easily be covered up. Really, the abortion industry, if you look at it, it always goes back to how they can make as much profit as possible at the expense of women's health and safety, and of course, the lives of preborn children.
Well, and it's remarkable because they're actually proud of that. They're proud
Yes.
about making money at the expense of other people's misery and their confusion, quite frankly, and their desperate situation in many cases. Rather than helping women along, they're looking forward to making money. And this one, I found this article pretty alarming. Crain's Chicago Business, June 13th, 2022. After Roe, she'll be on the front lines. Planned Parenthood of Illinois CEO Jennifer Welch prepares for an out-of-state wave of abortion demand. She's preparing for it. In fact, the article goes on to say that they're expecting, let's see here. The organization predicts those numbers currently will skyrocket to 20,000 to 30,000 out-of-state abortion patients annually if neighboring and some southern states prohibit or severely limit abortions. The projection is based on research that shows thousands of women from other states already leave their home state for abortion care, and that Illinois will often be the closest option for women departing their home states if Roe falls. Welch figures Planned Parenthood of Illinois will need to add at least 50 staffers, offer more in-person and telehealth appointments, and raise tens of millions to pay for it all. So they're banking on making money once Roe falls.
Yes, absolutely. And they've been Planned Parenthood, they're not dumb. They're very savvy business, and they saw the handwriting on the wall years ago. And as many of your listeners probably know, during the pandemic, they opened 3 new large clinics on the borders with our neighboring states, on the borders with Wisconsin, Indiana, and Missouri, with Roe being overturned in mind. And actually, in that Crain's article, the research that they cite to determine the number of women who will be coming to Illinois for abortions, I believe it's from 2017. Just last fall, the Guttmacher Institute, which used to be the research arm of Planned Parenthood, issued projections, and they estimate that Illinois, should Roe versus Wade be overturned, Illinois will become home to the closest abortion clinic for as many as 10 million out-of-state reproductive aged women. So the 20 to 30,000 new out-of-state abortion number is actually, I believe, very conservative. I think there could be many, many more women coming to Illinois. And, and as we said...
and currently we there's about 40,000 abortions performed in Illinois.
And just over 42,000. And in 2020, there were, I believe it was 10,000, 20,000 women from out of state who came to Illinois. It was an alarming number, whatever it was. And, that's nothing, absolutely nothing compared to what we could see.
Well, that's shocking to me, and it should be concerning for every taxpayer because, as you know, we have a presumption of eligibility for women who are pregnant, which means that when they report into a Medicaid office, they could use anybody's assumed address, maybe a friend's that they're staying with. And if they're pregnant, they're assumed to be Medicaid eligible. And if then, and then that's not really investigated for the first 60 days. So they can get immediate treatment if they're pregnant. That's the reason for the presumption of eligibility. But that presumption of eligibility for Medicaid would also mean that they could get taxpayer-funded abortion because that's what we do in the state. We now fund abortions through our Medicaid program.
Right. And the presumptive eligibility clause in our Medicaid law, it's basically an open door for anybody, whether they're an Illinois resident or not, to get a taxpayer-funded abortion. And I've been on interviews with people from Planned Parenthood, people from other pro-abortion organizations, and they will deny up one side and down the other that this takes place. But there is so much anecdotal evidence that this is indeed happening, and that this is exactly what they had in mind when this presumptive eligibility clause was put into effect.
Well, so it gets even stranger, in my opinion, that corporations are kind of looking at this as another, or I'm sorry, government leaders are looking at this as another reason to lure corporations to the state of Illinois. I mean, first of all, you had Lori Lightfoot literally saying, well, we're going to find a way to help fund the travel expenses for women in need. Women in need who, and I put that in quotes, air quotes, who want to come to Illinois for an abortion. If they can't afford it, we're going to try and find the funding. Well, what do you mean, Lori Lightfoot? Do you mean you're going to use taxpayer money to provide travel for out-of-state residents to come to the state of Illinois for an abortion? I mean, that's just outrageous. But on top of that, another alarming Chicago Tribune headline: if Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade, it could offer surprising benefit to Illinois. More corporate offices. Reading on, it says the U.S. Supreme Court seems poised to overturn Roe v. Wade, and although state and city officials are harshly critical of any moves to restrict reproductive rights, they also say reversing the landmark decision would help Illinois attract businesses eager to recruit young workers with socially progressive views. Officials already lure corporations by touting, this is Illinois, their strong support for voting rights. Oh, come on. Racial justice. I mean, the black on black crime is amazing. The total dismantling of any sort of semblance of Chicago public schools educating black kids. Anyway, racial justice and protections for LGBTQ individuals, but losing the constitutional right to abortion should further strengthen their hand with businesses from red states likely to outlaw the procedure. Governor Pritzker, this is another arrow in our quiver. We are always talking to companies about coming to Illinois, but this is another powerful point of discussion. Oh, okay. You just lost Caterpillar.
And
you
Boeing.
just lost Boeing.
Yeah.
And this is going to be what brings them back or makes other people stay. These people are delusional.
Exactly.
Delusional.
Exactly. Well, yeah. I mean, this is out of my bailiwick. I mean, I mean, what's the saying? Go woke, go broke. There's no way. Going back to the polling, I mean, the reality is most people don't like abortion. Most people are uncomfortable with abortion. For most people,
most people, they want Bill Clinton's safe, legal, and rare.
Exactly.
To be the moniker of abortion.
Exactly.
That's what they want.
People do not want the radical agenda of Governor Pritzker and Personal PAC and the abortion industry in Illinois. And it is off the charts radical and out of step with what the majority of America believes about abortion. And, I'm kind of going out of my lane, but if Governor Pritzker and the leaders of Illinois think that abortion is going to, outweigh the horrible tax laws, economic just insanity that we have here. I mean, that's, like you said, delusional is exactly what it is. And going back to Lori Lightfoot, I mean, the thing that I just, Chicago, the violence is out of control. It really, really is. Our offices are right in the loop. And, after a certain time of night, we don't go outside by ourselves. And Chicago didn't used to be that way. I used to be fine going downtown, being out walking with my friends, walking, out at night. And now it's so sad because you just can't do that. And if Lori Lightfoot thinks that increasing the violence of abortion is going to do anything to help the violence that's so rampant in the city right now, again, it's delusional.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. So, I just find it just curious that we are at this state of play when it comes to abortion. I mean, it should be something that everybody sort of agrees with to some degree. And I do think that there's more commonality on it when you actually get to have conversations with people.
Absolutely.
And even the states that I know of, and I mean, Iowa next door, they're looking at, I think, a heartbeat bill. So, I mean, it seems common sense to me. Again, the Roe v. Wade decision coming down is really based on a 15-week abortion limitation. And that's no different than France.
No, exactly.
So I don't know how we got to be one of the most extreme countries on this issue when it came to abortions.
Well, yeah, one of only 7 countries with North Korea and other, totalitarian regimes that allow abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy.
So you've been in this fight for a long time, and you came from Wisconsin now to Illinois. And I remember you coming into Illinois saying, well, you know what? We've got to fight the fight here, even as hopeless as it may seem. This is worth doing. So tell me a little bit more about the hope that you have.
Well, I came to Illinois, as you said, because we are ground zero for the abortion debate right here in the center of the country. And One of my messages is, it's wonderful that our neighboring states have passed all these pro-life laws and that it's likely they'll pass more pro-life laws. But with Illinois sitting here, as extreme as it is, their residents are in a lot of danger. Their preborn babies are in a lot of danger. So the thing that was really encouraging to me when I came to Illinois was seeing that it's not as completely lost as a lot of people might think it is. The three laws that have taken us down this path to abortion extremism, HB 40 back in 2017, the Reproductive Health Act in 2019, and then the repeal of parental notice of abortion last year, all of those passed by just 2, 3, 4 votes, just a handful of votes. And there are a growing number of quote unquote pro-choice Democrats in our legislature who realize that we have gone a bridge too far when it comes to abortion, and they understand that we're completely out of touch with what most people believe. So in order to stop some of the plans of abortion advocates, and there are many, we really only need to flip 3 or 4 or 5 seats in the upcoming election, and we can stop some of the things that abortion advocates are planning. Attacks on pregnancy resource centers, which, yes, are coming.
What do they want to do there? I mean, before there was legislation that was actually passed and then found, I believe, unconstitutional that said that pro-life pregnancy centers had to refer for abortion when they're given the menu of options to the women who come in.
Right.
Now I remember that debate. And again, that's another one that Rauner signed on to.
Right. And so actually just
but then it was challenged in court.
Exactly. Well, California actually passed a law similar to that. The U.S. Supreme Court said that it violated the First Amendment and was struck down. But that didn't stop Illinois, because a very similar law was introduced. And I believe now it was with Kelly Cassidy at the end of the session. So, and we'll see if it comes back up again. But one thing that I think is very alarming in the state of New York, they just signed a law that authorizes the health department to form a committee to investigate the detrimental effect that pregnancy resource centers have on women's health in the state of New York. And everybody who's required to be on this commission, they require an abortionist, they require somebody from the Social Justice Commission at the within their Justice Department. They require somebody who, I forget what the wording was, but it was basically somebody who's an abortion advocate, somebody who's, an abortion, in the pro-abortion industry. So you have this group of pro-abortion people who are determining if pregnancy resource centers are a detriment. Nothing good can come from this. I mean, absolutely nothing. And people might wonder, well, why do we care about a law in New York? The New York's version of the Reproductive Health Act passed in January, just a couple of short months before Governor Pritzker signed our own Reproductive Health Act. So what is happening in these other pro-abortion states, we need to keep a very close eye on here in the state of Illinois, because it could happen here. And we know that pregnancy resource centers are a huge, huge threat and deterrent to women having abortions. So of course the abortion industry would want to shut them down. And we've heard rumors that is coming.
Well, very good. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. You have really shed some light on what's going on in the state on this topic. And we await in 1 week that decision. I'm confident it's going to come back to the states, and then the fights can begin. And as our surrounding states will show us the way.
Absolutely. And there is hope for Illinois. People should not be discouraged.
Very good. Amy Gehrke, Executive Director for Illinois Right to Life. Back with you for our second segment. I'm going to have Adam Angiefsky on the phone to talk about government accountability, those royalty payments that it sounds like Fauci and other NIH personnel received, and far more, hopefully including that $2 billion worth of fraud that happened in the Illinois IDS department. So thank you for joining me, and stay with me. Welcome back to The Real Story with Jeannie Ives. On the phone with me is Adam Angiefsky. Now, he's somebody that most Illinoisans should know, as he ran for governor in 2010, and he did not give up on Illinois or the rest of the country. He has been fighting the good fight and started an entire organization, a 501c3 called Open the Books. And boy, has Adam opened the books. He has gotten plenty of national attention, and especially lately for revealing that Fauci received royalties from the very companies that he is supposed to be, that he has handed out government grants to. So this is earth-shattering news, Adam, and that's really why I want you on my program. I want you to talk about this latest investigative report you did that has gotten plenty of play up in D.C. by a lot of prominent folks, including Senator Rand Paul, who asked Fauci directly last week, did you receive royalties? And for which Fauci, if I remember correctly, dodged the question. So what's going on here, Adam? This is incredible work on your part.
Well, thank you, Jeannie. As you know, we believe transparency revolutionizes United States public policy and politics. And I know of no better unit of government where this needs to start than at the National Institutes of Health. So I think during the pandemic, all of us, we got the sense that there was a very close relationship between big government and big pharma. And so our investigation of third-party payments, third-party royalty payments, think pharmaceutical companies, to NIH, National Institutes of Health, and 1,805 of their scientists, we were able to, using the Freedom of Information Act and a federal lawsuit, discover that over the course of the last decade, $400 million of these third-party royalty payments flowed from private sector entities to the agency and its scientists. Every single one of those payments could be a conflict of interest. And furthermore, as you said in the introduction, we have discovered empirically that Dr. Fauci, Francis Collins, who was the former head of the National Institutes of Health, Fauci's deputies, and other heads of institutes at National Institutes of Health also received royalties.
Well, we've just seen billions and upon billions of dollars spent at the federal level to go to these pharmaceutical companies during a COVID crisis. And now we're just learning now that there may have been kickbacks. I mean, that's what it sounds like. It sounds like there's been kickbacks.
Well, you can fairly characterize them as kickbacks when they don't show you the flow of funds, right?
That's right.
And that's exactly what's going on at the National Institutes of Health. You know, if we had transparency on the database, we could call them third-party paid royalties. But in the absence of transparency, you have to assume, and they say, trust us, we don't, that they are fall under the definition of kickbacks. So let's kind of, I'm going to walk you through one scenario.
Okay.
So back in 2005, this database was the last time it had transparency. We had noticed at openthebooks.com that the Associated Press had filed a Freedom of Information Act request, and they got the entire database, and they found a scandal. And it was Dr. Anthony Fauci. He had received $45,000 worth of royalty payments from 1997 through 2004. And these were for an experimental AIDS invention where he received the royalties.
Mm-hmm.
The United States taxpayer had spent, through Fauci's own agency, which he's the director of, the National Institute of Allergies and Infectious Diseases, the United States taxpayer put $36 million into testing Fauci's invention on humans. He's the head of it. He's receiving royalties. And then the Associated Press finds out that flow of funds. And he admitted that, yes, he had concerns about this. He said he brought it to NIH. They said, you know, they were in the process of going through a policy recommendation when the Associated Press came out with the news, and Fauci said, yes, it's a conflict of interest. I'm going to donate my royalties. Everything went silent for 17 years till we filed the same request. Here's what happened, Jeannie.
What?
NIH didn't even respond to our request. They ignored it. So we sued them in federal court in October with Judicial Watch. Then we won on judicially mandated production. Starting on February 1st, they're slow walking and heavily redacting the production. So we've received about half of it. I can tell you the top line number halfway through. We received $197 million worth of royalties. So we can estimate over a decade, the sheer amount of royalties is going to cross $400 million. I can see the scientist names. There's 1,805 of them, including Fauci, Collins, and other leadership. But I can't tell you the individual payments to the scientists because they've been blacked out, erased, and redacted. I can't tell you the name of the third-party payer, think pharmaceutical company, because they've redacted the name of the payer. And I can't tell you the invention. The patent number and the license numbers are also blacked out. So they are acting like they have a lot to hide.
So it appears to me that this could be happening with other grants that we may give for research as well. And we just don't know yet. Is that true? I mean, because we spent a lot of money on all sorts of research, and whether if a government scientist is doing government work with government money, and then that becomes productive, and it is offshored to a private company to make it, scalable so that it can be used in the marketplace, and then that company is then giving paybacks to the scientist, even though he was paid by the government. I mean, that could be going on, or we could be just directly giving grants to other sorts of research institutions, colleges, universities, which are also still getting paid for by that research, getting paid for by the taxpayer. And then still you could have that filtered back to sort of administrators in various agencies, and they're getting sort of kickbacks or royalties or whatever you want to call it. And all of this, we need to shine a light on it. Because that's not how I think most Americans think the system should be working. I mean, we think that we should be paying for some research that is very complicated and that maybe an industry doesn't want to pick up because it's not going to be productive for decades. However, the kickback aspect, that is completely different because these are highly compensated public servants, in quotes.
Yeah. So all of what you just said is actually going on. We have examples that we haven't released yet of everything that you just talked about. Okay. So for instance, we haven't released an example. We'll break news right on your podcast here. There's a scientist at NIH. He had an invention. He's receiving royalties. The royalties are carried with you when you leave the agency. The scientist leaves the agency. He founds his own for-profit enterprise and exclusively licenses back his invention. Now his for-profit enterprise is paying royalties to NIH and himself for his own invention while he's out in the private marketplace monetizing it.
And meanwhile, his entire livelihood was supported by taxpayers that gave him the freedom to invent.
Yeah, and we're going to look at his salary when he was there. But look, they're all making north. The minimum salary that we've seen on the royalty recipients at NIH is $230,000, and it goes up to $350,000 a year. Now, some of these, Jeannie, are just mind-boggling. So 6 out of the top 20 scientists receiving the most royalty payments in the production that we have so far, which is about halfway through. 6 out of the top 20 are aged 80 to 91 years old. They're still working for NIH. One of them started during the Eisenhower administration.
Oh my gosh.
He's still there. He's making north of $300,000 a year at taxpayer expense. He hasn't authored a paper in years. So our question, which they haven't answered in the NIH spokesman shop, they've got 86 PR officials, and they won't answer our requests for comment or respond to our Freedom of Information Act requests any longer, defying federal transparency law. But they here's the question. They say they're on the cutting edge of science, and some of their most prominent scientists are still employed into their 80s and their 90s. Like, seriously, are taxpayers getting the best shake for our tax dollar?
Well, if you look at the over 80-year-old commander in chief, I wouldn't say so. I mean, he can't even seem to ride a bike.
That's true.
Okay.
And so these royalty payments, just to kind of flesh it out. So if you discover something at NIH as a well-compensated taxpayer scientist, you can receive royalty payments from the private sector. If you leave, you get to take them with you. Here's what we've also discovered. When you die, they go into your estate. So we have some of the top royalty receivers that are actually dead scientists. You can't even make this stuff up.
Good grief.
So we have a scientist that died in 2006. He's still receiving royalties. The same one with a scientist that died in 2007. I mean, if you take a look at the top 20 largest royalty receivers at NIH, they're so old, most of them are going to be dead within the next 10 years. We're going to be paying huge amounts of royalties to their estates.
That's just unreal. Oh my gosh, Adam, you're shocking me. Okay, and I should be immune to this after sitting in the Illinois State Legislature and watching the malfeasance go on with pensions alone. I should be immune to this, but I'm not.
Right.
I am just shocked that this has been allowed to happen. So I only have a brief time with you. I know you've got to move on to another event, but I just wanted to encourage people to go to your website, www.openthebooks.com. There is so much good information here, things that I didn't get to talk to you about, but I want you to know more about. Is you've got a headline article here: $350 billion of American Rescue Act, state and local aid. Well, I'm curious about that because just in Illinois, we've had this huge audit come out, and Illinois alone, $2 billion in unemployment security fraud, $2 billion.
Yes.
Over half the amount of unemployment that was paid out in the state of Illinois,
right.
Federal unemployment, is fraudulent.
Stolen.
Taxpayers were robbed. And, the Pritzker administration's response was, it's federal money and it's Trump's fault.
I saw that. It's absolutely unacceptable.
Completely.
The state agencies doled out that cash, and over half of it was stolen by criminals, con artists.
So I want you
syndicates from around the world.
Did you look into that yet, or is that on your radar?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I've been. So about a year and a half ago, we came out with an oversight report based on other people reporting, pulling from multiple sources and compiling it into one report, that it was going to be over half of the over $800 billion worth of unemployment security payments were stolen. And look, there's an open question, Jeannie, as to whether hackers from the Chinese military industrial complex funded an entire year of their Chinese communist military budget out of our stolen unemployment aid. It is an open question.
Oh my gosh.
The annual budget of the CCP military is $206 billion. And here's what no one's talking about. Chinese and Russian hackers and hackers from Nigeria and Africa, but specifically the Chinese and Russians, probably funded an entire year worth of their own military budget out of our stolen unemployment aid. And things were so bad that, for instance, in other programs, like for instance, everyone remembers the $1,200 check that ended up in your mailbox. That was the stimulus, the economic stimulus check that most people received. Well, 2.2 million dead people got a check because the IRS, who was administering the program, they didn't check with the Social Security Administration, who keeps the deceased persons list. I mean, why keep a deceased persons list if you're going to cut the check, if you're not going to, check the list before you cut the check? They didn't cut the check. 2.2 million checks cost us $3.6 billion.
Okay, so even in Illinois...
So there's fraud across the entire system.
Absolutely. Even in Illinois, the Chicago Tribune did its own audit in 2021 of just the first few months of IDS fraud that was going on. And even the Tribune was able to figure out that IDS paid out unemployment to hundreds of people that were either over 90 years old, based off a birth date, or under the age of 14, and they paid it out. This is, the worst thing about this is that, I'm going to say it. Most people don't want me to say it. I'm going to say it. We have very, very sophisticated financial managers who work for very large multinational corporations that know how to fix this. Where is their help in fixing this and securing us from hackers in securing our money from being stolen. Where are they? Where are the patriots in those big corporations saying, guess what? I'm here to help.
I know.
Because there are millions of financial transactions.
He's got all the connections.
Yep. There's millions of financial transactions that happen every single day in the United States. And I tell you what, if any of these companies had $2 billion of fraud perpetrated on them, people's heads would roll. People would be fired. And as far as I can tell, not a single person has been fired in the Illinois Department of Employment Security over this fraud. It's shameful.
It's stunning. It's shocking. The numbers are staggering. It's the largest public fraud in the history of the state, in the history of the country.
Well, look at him.
And look, to your point,
go ahead.
With Pritzker, he's got all the connections to ask the private sector to come in and tighten up all the system in the state of Illinois. I mean, he's got all the private sector business connections. So to your point, why wasn't it done?
I don't know. Listen, I want to be very respectful of your time. I thank you for coming on my podcast. You're very insightful. I encourage everybody to go to www.openthebooks.com. You may want to have a glass of wine with you to relax yourself before you start reading this stuff because some of it is alarming. It's good information all of us need to know. Thank you for your work that you do. I'm really pleased to see how that you're getting recognized for your work. And Godspeed.
Thank you, Jeannie. Thank you very much for having me on the platform today.
All right. Okay, coming up next, a little bit of a recap about what's happened over the last few days in the state of Illinois. Again, this is Jeannie Ives with The Real Story. All right, take care. Welcome back to The Real Story with Jeannie Ives. I just wanted to give a quick little recap, recognizing the fact that this is my 100th podcast. So it's kind of exciting to be able to put this together for you and connect the dots. And I hope that's what we're able to do here at The Real Story with Jeannie Ives and Breakthrough Ideas, honestly, as well. We're here to essentially give you information that you may not be aware of and tell you who the players are when all this is happening and hopefully bring in some insight from my past time as a state legislator and actually my just continuous reading of what's going on around the state and at the federal level. So we hope to just basically connect the dots for you and so that you make a more informed choice. And some of that information that I think that we've been really good at doing is bringing you real information from what's happening in the schools, from the mask mandates to the diversity, equity, inclusion issues that have been going on to really one of I think is the biggest issue is how the academic standards have been slipping and how the kids are not being educated in the state of Illinois, despite spending literally close to $40 billion overall on education. So we're going to continue to bring those stories. We're going to continue to highlight what's going on locally, especially in the DuPage County and suburban area, because that's kind of where we're focused. That's where a bigger part of the fight is. But there's so much to talk about. I think looking forward to the next 100 podcasts that we're going to be doing, certainly over the summer, we're going to be taking on election integrity, energy, and education. Those 3 E's will continue to be some of the biggest issues that we cover throughout the state. So I thank you for joining me on this podcast, and please share it with other people as well. So marking down 100 podcasts today. So much to talk about in the state of Illinois, nearly every single day. And it's important for people to be focused on what's going on, not just in the state, but also locally. If you have something you want to share with us, you can easily email me at info@breakthrough-ideas.com. Send me your tips, send me your suggestions, send me your comments, send me your stories. And in many cases, I will reach out and try to get more information. And oftentimes, I will even have you on my podcast. So again, info@breakthrough-ideas.com, and also sign up for our weekly newsletter at breakthrough-ideas.com. Thank you so much for joining me. This is The Real Story with Jeannie Ives. Thanks.